problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight on our beautiful blue planet, this home we call Earth. Take another breath, celebrate another day of life when so many have passed. This last weekend was a recollection of, what has been sacrificed for our country to keep us to this point of being able to be quote unquote free. And here we sit at the cusp of our own officials calling for the shutdown of American farms. Sickening is the word I could use to describe that. A hoax is probably a better word. You saw what happened in the Netherlands, Dutch farmers. They're using the same MO. Oh, there's too much nitrogen, there's too much CO2. Now you have to understand, this is never going to stop, ever, until we make it stop. They're coming for America now. The farms, your food, your sustenance is the next target. If they can get away with it here in the United States, then really the rest of the planet has no hope. Think about you being controlled and told where you can buy your food. Limited foods, only GMO foods, only bioprinted foods, only genetically modified bioprinted foods from certain distributors that are in the behemoth of the agro-complex. Do you think for one moment that the GMO corn that puts ethanol into the gasoline supply is going to be affected by this? Do you really think that 15% reduction in nitrogen is targeted toward the ethanol crop? I don't think so. It is targeted toward the things that you put in your belly. And as we move through tonight's dialogue, what are the implications of a debt downgrade for the United States? I mean, what are they going to have? All these investment funds across the U.S. going to change their bylaws? So, because the U.S. is just about to be downgraded. And the rules are only investment grade debt can be held by pension funds, etc. So watch them. They're going to start to change the bylaws. I had a really good conversation with Francis Hunt today. We spent about an hour and a half on an interview, the economic sniper. And he was telling me, what happens when they call force majeure on your mortgage, even though you might think you have a fixed rate mortgage. Word is on the street, just whispers that they're going to do a force majeure and then force you into an adjustable rate, new super highly priced mortgage, even though you have under contract with your bank a fixed rate mortgage. Things like this are being discussed now. So how do you protect yourself moving forward? I mean, it's an all around onslaught. Every vector at this moment has suddenly been turned on. So my question is, as we start tonight, what's happening in the heavens? What's happening with the magnetic field of our planet, the magnetic field of the sun? What is going on that suddenly everything vector-wise for the attack is put into motion? Well, you saw there Neptune. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it was Uranus. They just got some new photos and imagery back from radio telescopes that showed cyclonic activity in both north and the south pole of Uranus. Now, the only thing that can trigger that and start that is electromagnetic activity. You start to see that and go, what is really happening up there? And Jupiter now, if you hadn't seen the latest from NASA, they're confirming that the stripes on Jupiter have suddenly, in an instant, changed. Photograph one day, a different set of stripes the next day. Electromagnetic. And then suddenly we see this talk of controlling the food supply the very same week that the information was released about the new cyclonic northern and southern hemisphere storms on Uranus, and then the flip of the stripes in Jupiter. So Ransom's here with me tonight. Ransom Godwin. We're going to try to figure it out. as above, so below is really what we're dealing with here. So, Ransom, appreciate you joining me as always. Take it away, man. Oh, I have to add him. Damn, why am I always like that? Add the participant. Ransom, I hope you were listening so you can jump right in. I was in a rush to get on this tonight. There you go. Welcome to the podcast tonight. Revolution Radio, we're streaming out live anywhere you can find podcasts hosted across that. Ransom, welcome.
Hello, hello.
All right.
I think I'm connected there.
I hope so bad. I hope we're all connected together in this crazy world.
Yeah, they said our volume is low on our broadcast, so I was trying to make sure that that's fixed. So if you guys tell me in the chats if the volume is better, that'll be appreciated. Anyway, yeah, what a crazy stuff. I was looking, basically through the Bilderberg meetings, what their agenda is and all of that. You know, you sent me a copy. I've been really on that because I always pay attention to Bilderberg ever since I went to it and saw that, at a time when they were still saying that it didn't exist on the radio right when I was at it, and they were saying, oh, there's a few nuts out there with signs, and I'm at it and there's like thousands of people. There really is heads of state, commerce, driving into this place. There's guys on the roofs with MP5s. And this was in, Virginia. So it's kind of weird to see that you have foreign powers so powerful that they got, remember, they don't want you to have anything to protect yourself, but they will have off-duty Marines with MP5s just hanging out all around them so you don't get close and take a picture or make eye contact or any of that. But besides that, so I'm looking through, their agenda, and what does it say? It's basically, you could go it one by one down this list, and for the last 2 years, we've been telling you exactly, this is what they're tripping on. This is what they're worried about. So let's start at number one. AI, obviously. Banking system, we've been telling you. They're ready to, totally transform that and rebuild it and reset it. And then look at the countries, China, India, Russia. Doesn't that sound like Brinks that they're talking about there? Banking systems, fiscal challenges, transitional threats. And then, of course, they have Ukraine, U.S. leadership. And what does this tell me? That they're thinking about this major shakeup, World War III. They're thinking about, who's going to be the major players, who's not going to be. And then if you skip to the second part that's here in Washington, D.C., you really see where it's going. So first you see this is the war. This is the war that you're seeing the reset right here. AI, banking system, China, energy transition, Europe, fiscal challenge, India, industrial policy and trade, NATO, Russia, transitional threats, Ukraine, U.S. leadership. That's the war. That's the major war. Now look down here at what they have that they're going to talk about. What comes next? Geopolitical realignments. Remember, I've said that exact term I don't know how many times. NATO, China, Indo-Pacific realignment. In other words, the Indian and Pacific Oceans realignment. That's what I've been talking about because China is about to expand out. And then you got energy security, sustainability, of course, Russia again. And then here's this other thing that we keep talking about that they're really planning on, continuity of government and economy. Not your economy, not the one you're part of, not the one that, you're worried about making it or breaking it. No, they're talking about the new economy afterwards. And you can tell that by their next point, disruption of the global financial system. Also what we've been talking about. Disinformation. And we're going to get into this a lot because this is the key thing. What they have done is basically decided that every idea from every citizen from every country is going to be owned by this world government. And they're starting in the major, factions of the world government, i.e. the United States. And we'll get into that. And they're calling it, the name of the program, the cognitive infrastructure. And what they mean by that is that they own your ideas. And we've been talking a lot about this. And now we're coming into the era of brain chips. I'm sure you've heard Elon Musk has the go ahead for putting chips in people's brains. And then when you just add all of these dots together, fragmentation of democratic societies, trade and de-globalization, and Ukraine, of course, but just you could tell by these terms right here what their plans are. Literally, energy transition, industrial policy and trade, transitional threats. They're talking about the major war and the change of how people send and receive goods. And then down here, of course, the aftermath, geopolitical realignment, realignment in the Pacific and the Indonesian Oceans, energy security and sustainability, because, of course, they're going to bring us this idea of nonstop hacking everything. Everything is because of the hackers. But don't worry about it. If you get on our new secure digital network that goes right to your brain, we will take care of your financial needs. We will take care of all of your documents, what you own and what you don't own. We'll have all your health records on there. And as you can tell right here by this one, post-pandemic health, meaning that they're going to use some of their powers that they gave themselves for the near future. And then this is the really important one right here. Fragmentations of democratic societies, trade and deglobalization. Those are the boom right in your face. What's about to happen is they're shutting it all down, and they're doing that. And they're going to blame all these different reasons on it, shortages, trade disputes, war, the main one, obviously. And then you just think about this. The U.S. government now says, right here, if I can find it, I want to show everybody, basically that they own any idea that you have. So if the U.S. government and the Chinese government are doing these things, then you can, rest assured that the rest of the world's going to follow suit. U.S. government says it owns everyone's thoughts, calling it cognitive infrastructure. Now, what does this mean, really? I mean, it means that any idea that you come up to bypass their new system is going to be considered owned or criminal. So this gets into all kinds of ideas here, and people are really only thinking about it as far as the social media aspect of who gets to censor, who doesn't get to censor, what you're allowed to see, what you're not allowed to see, what you're allowed to report on, what you're not allowed to report on. And I don't know if you saw that article I sent you that was talking about how the poor meteorologists and climate experts are always getting threatened and harassed, and it's all due to people that don't believe their story, i.e. conspiracy theorists. So you could tell that we're going down this super 1984 pathway, and it seems to be like when, an impassable object meets an unstoppable object, and we're going to have to come to a head on ideas on the entire planet, not just you and your local area, the country that you live in, but the entire world is now going to be in the crucible of who gets to decide, literally all the way down to the basic thought inside your head. And these are topics that the world elite and the world government, the governmental agencies or the authoritative government sources, as they've been telling you, because they have a lot of new terminology for you to get used to for this reset. They are telling you that they are going to run everything. Now, when it comes time that possibly around the world something happens that causes an immediate reaction on your dinner plate, wherever you live. So you feel it at home. You feel the hurt, whether it's a money issue where they're deciding what the new currencies are going to be and you're getting stuck in that transition where things aren't worth anything, or, the food supply literally does run out for one reason or another, whether war, natural disaster, you pick it. Then when people get on these social media companies and start complaining and saying what they know and what they found out in their local area, they're just all going to be turned off. And not only that, their access to the networks, to the cognitive infrastructure will be deleted, meaning that you'll just be unpersoned. And this will mean that you can't go shop at their mega stores. That'll be the only thing left. And we can get into that too, how all of the major manufacturing outlet stores or box stores like Walmart, Target, etc., they're about to close shop. And they're going to do it in a weird way. They're not going to be closed. They're just going to have a centralized location where all the products are locked up, where you only get to see the one product and you get to pick what that is, and you'll tell them, and then you will go to the front, and then they will give you your products at the front. You're not going to get to pick them or decide you like this package better than that package. You're going to tell a robot what you want, and then they'll inventory that and charge you at the front, and you will have very little interaction, which means the whole store will basically be humanless. There's not going to be anybody to talk to for customer service. The only people that you're going to get to meet are the robot that takes your order, the robot that checks you out, and the security guard that makes sure that you're not trying to do anything more than just, pass through the line. And I remember a while back, I think it was a couple of years ago, that you were talking about, they were already starting these programs to get people used to rice. What was it? It was like a machine that gave you a rice ration. And then a couple of years later, they're talking about a worldwide rice shortage. So they have plans for all of this stuff. They've been implementing the beta program so that you get used to it. And it's that incremental system where they do it really draconian and drastic, and then people complain and they pull back the line a little bit, but not all the way. So they get to keep some of their emergency powers, and you also get used to a new way of things. And that's where we're at right now. We're just on the precipice of this new horrible dystopia. And while they're getting ready to create that and make it happen, everybody's arguing about nonsensical things that don't matter, that don't feed them. And, they have the list of trigger conversations for those people out there that want to, protest each other, argue with each other. And they have a whole system designed to keep your attention span totally kept in a, 1 minute to 3 minute time slot. From TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all of them are doing it the same. The media, where they give you about a 5 to 10-second reel of attention span, which is the same, like I said, as a goldfish. And while you're paying attention to all of that, they just slowly change the infrastructure. And people can't remember just a few years ago or 10 years ago when people were freaked out about some of the stuff they were doing. Like, everybody now knows that everything you do is spied on. They're even, bragging about it. The government brags about it now at this point. At one time, that was thought of as unheard of, and no way. They only spy on bad people and terrorists. Well, that's not the case now. And the reason for that is because they're setting up an entire system where that anybody that disagrees with anything will be considered an insurgent to the new system, an insurgent, and you got to take care of insurgency. So that eradicates all the outliers and get rid of them, turn them off of the payment systems, turn them off of the social media. And this is the whole thing that Bilderberg's meeting about. How do they implement what has been going on social media and news to the next degree, to the, 100 times what it's doing now, where no ideas slip through the cracks. And that's what we're seeing in real time right now.
So I'd like to interject a joke. So how do you transport $100 billion of laundered money? That's incredibly heavy. And how would you move that from one place to another place? We're talking about $100 billion of laundered cash. How do you move it? You crane it. I had to interject some fun into there, Ransom. But yeah, I remember that article you told me about, and I actually read it. Meteorologists face unprecedented harassment. This is from CNN. It's not harassment. It's just, I saw a peer-reviewed research paper that is completely 100% opposite from what you're spewing out to the public. I challenge you on that. And now that is considered harassment and bullying, because an alternative fact that you bring to the attention of their audience or the person themselves, those are now considered threatening emails. I was shocked myself. Okay, so let's say you get a fact wrong. People call me out and try to say, Earth's flat and all these other things and whatever. Okay, great. But if I do make a mistake, I'm super happy that people point it out to me. I try to be as factual as I can with my channel. If I make mistakes, I'm only human. I'll even in the next video say I made a mistake in the last video. I do that quite commonly. But to frame this as criminal activity, to say, yo, media broadcaster, That was not the driest, hottest right now. If you look back in the 650 era or the 200 BC era, according to 50 peer-reviewed research, all sandwich the data together, that this is not the driest period in any way, shape, or form, whether it's the drought record or the temperature record, the snow record, the flood record, the hurricane record, whatever. And you send them peer-reviewed research and actually say, yo, you made a mistake. That is now considered threatening and harassing emails, which they can call the police on you. For simply sending a peer-reviewed research that says, I oppose what you just said there as false. This is where it is. Now they're protecting the complete fiction of what is media through some sort of legality and litigation, which is right along. It doesn't even surprise me where, these books that were prior written, doesn't matter which book it was. I think we've been through these cycles before, and that's how these books have been written. Perhaps they were kept and hidden, and then, 200 or 300 years later, like manuscripts are refound. They're like, oh, magnetic fields are changing again. Okay, the same exact type of control is going to need to be pushed across the planet. I am absolutely saying, okay, we're going to talk about cognitive infrastructure for just a moment. The changing magnetic field on the sun is absolutely 100% unequivocally responsible for a lot of anger and violence and different types of emotions that we're seeing on the planet run through, I don't care what population you are, what continent you are, what religion you are. The world is becoming skittish and unhinged in an angry, violent way. Come to find out, there's been several peer-reviewed research papers, especially most of them were done in the 1960s and 70s, which is interesting. And then the publication of this information ceased. It's very difficult to find one in the 2010 or 2020 era. What they did was they took rats, lab rats, and lab mice, both rats and mice, and they had magnetic field chambers that they put them in. And they could adjust the field strength, just like you can with any lab experiment now. How do you think they do an enormous amount of experiments to see how plasma might react or whatnot? They're playing with the magnetic field in a chamber. Okay, well, it's not pressurized, but they put mice in there to see how they behave. They built them little homes, and then all they did was they changed the magnetic field. Well, with that magnetic field change, there was stark, unbelievable changes in behavior. When the lower the magnetic field goes, the more agitated and violent the society of mice became. When they turned it down to a 0 point, they cannibalized each other, and the very last one itself started to eat itself alive at a 0 point. So I'm thinking, whoa, just hold on a second here. And then the rats observed and the exact same behavior. The lower the magnetic field goes, it goes down into full agitation and full anger and full violence, like unmitigated, like some of these zombie movies that you've seen where it's just, it doesn't stop. It continues. And the way the peer-reviewed research was published was like, families are going to kill each other in the house so the magnetic field of the planet goes really, really low. So I'm thinking to myself, sheesh, we know we're coming into a magnetic anomaly in 2024, October. So what is it about wanting to control all thought? Like the things we're seeing right now, just as an armchair observer, if you were just somebody sitting out on a lawn chair because, Memorial Day, a lot of people were chilling, on a lawn chair, and you had not seen anything up to this point, you had lived in a cave and you just popped out and it was Memorial Day and you're sitting there on a chair looking at society, and you would notice that there were stark changes in people's behavior. Well, it seems that all what we're seeing, the stories, the narratives, the push, the pull, this group against that group, this country against that country, this religion against that religion, whatever it is, it's all seemingly made to appear on the surface that there's more violence going on. But I'm thinking, damn, they made the excuse for the conditions of a lower magnetic field where people are becoming more agitated. So as we move from now through 2024, a couple things to keep in mind. The society, if it follows the experiments in the 1960s and 70s, will become a more violent, nonstop violent place with agitation where people just snap off on a hairpin, literally. Is this already built into what we see moving forward? Because a lot of these things seem to take place after 2025. Like this next 2 years seem to be like a gray zone where what's going to be implemented in terms of thought, conditioning, CBDCs, controlled 15-minute cities, grids, whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be happening within these 2 years. It seems to be poised to roll out after 2025, 26, 27. Well, for me, that's the survivors who are left after this magnetic field anomaly and then the planetary bombardment with space debris coming in April of 2025, after the Earth's out in front of the sun and all the gas giants behind it. Like the implementation of this, it seems like they're prepositioning, I should say, thought assets out there to explain away the violence that you're seeing in front of you. It just doesn't make sense unless there's another factor at play. Like if you go back about 2 years, Neptune's atmosphere reversed. And also Uranus had visible X-rays. Like if you look at an X flare off the sun, you can actually see that X formation coming off of the sun. Well, the same thing happened with Uranus. There was X-rays visible that jumped off the planet's surface to the rings and then out. So these are electromagnetic anomalies throughout the entire solar system, reaching way out to the outer planets. So what's happening here in the local, right in the inner solar system, things seem to be lockstepping with all the celestial activity. There seems to be a lockstep here on the terrestrial activity from governments. Now, if you look at what's happening, the petrodollar replacement. Now, what is the next logical move? Just gameplay this out with me for a moment. You understand that there's a lower magnetic field coming in through the next year and a half, and it's just going to continue at its rate. It might step down in like some bigger steps, but generally from now until then, we're going to get a constant curve rate off of that will be forecastable on how human behavior will be bent. In the agitation, in the violence, in the non-caring, and just the skittish behavior and psychosis behavior becomes prevalent in lower magnetic fields. Okay, I get it. Perhaps when we talk about Neanderthals and Denisovans, perhaps they came to a low magnetic field and they ripped each other apart, and the only ones that were left were the strongest and the biggest ones. We go through these cycles here, and then suddenly there's just one species left. Is that it, where it comes into this full-on all rage, like literally rage that comes out of whatever species are on the planet? You got to think about, we're just humans. What happens if the animals do that too? And it's a nonstop, packs of dogs and wolves and ripping apart anything and themselves. What a terrifying world that would be. You wouldn't even really be able to step outside your house without going out fully armed and fully armored up yourself with several people, not one, in case an onslaught of animals came at you. And it could be squirrels. Can you imagine how terrifying a bunch of weasels and squirrels running at you by the hundreds to just start biting you everywhere would be? I mean, this is the kind of magnetic field anomalies that they're envisioning of just skittish behavior of all species on the planet, all species. What will be the next thing? Now, you're going to have to explain away why everything's becoming more skittish, psychosis, and violent on the planet. Replacing the petrodollar would be it. That would be the very next logical step for me. Take away the money, restrict the money supply. That it's a dual cause anyway. You need to move over to a new system. So that's part of it's, plugged and played in there for the new monetary system anyway. But at the same time, it could explain away a bunch of violent behavior. People are just angry because their money's gone. People are angry because they lost their pension funds. People are angry because their Social Security checks aren't coming. People are angry because the Medicare. People are angry the hospital closed. People are angry their pensions couldn't get the debt grade. The investment grade debt is not available any longer. The Libor is changing to SOFR. Oh, there's trillions lost. Oh, we've closed the stock markets. Now, can you imagine the amount of anger and animosity of people losing their money? That'll buy the global elite probably 6 months to explain the extra violence that's just around. In the air is the better term for it, literally in the air. This is something that's it's not stoppable by you or me. It is an electromagnetic field from the sun. That is untamable. unless we are millions of years advanced in technology, where you could tune that up or down. If you truly could tune it up or down, and that would mean some sort of transparent encapsulation across the entire planet, literally out hundreds of miles up to the ionosphere, 100 miles off of Earth, completely encapsulating the Earth. But you're talking millions and millions, if not billions of years advanced technology. Would they have the ability to put a wraparound coating 100 miles up around the entire planet that's translucent and transparent, that it would not interfere with sunlight and still allow, UV radiation in, allow plants to grow, but at the same time, it was a control for electromagnetic field strength adjustment? Otherwise, that's uncontrollable. So look how the elite might use some of these things that are built into the changes naturally to ride on top of them. Then what could you do? Because almost everything we're seeing today is a scripted play, but it's not scripted in a way that's really helpful for anybody. It's scripted for elites to ride on top of these natural cycles. They know the human behavior patterns within the entry and exit of these cycles. They know the monetary destruction that occurs during these. You can't value anything. The food production decreases, people starve, there's no work, governments adjust. And I guarantee, I mark my words, after this, and see what we're seeing right here is we're seeing a movement to a new form of governance over the global citizenry. No different than Magna Carta. I kid you not, no different than Magna Carta. But when we're looking at the magnetic field changes during these grand solar minimums, you start to see that. A new global governance pattern swings in every time we come into these grand solar minimums or super grand solar minimums, or something even on a much larger scale that there's not really words for or cycles built in on it. Braze cycle, perhaps. But whatever you see across this world happening right now, it is to mask the natural cycles that are happening. Now, how does John Kerry and his whole, we got to do away with nitrogen and close American farms, and if they don't obey, we need to confiscate them like they did in the Netherlands talk? How does that fit into it? Global food shortages were inbound anyway. It happens every single time. There has not been one time there's not been global food shortages associated with a low magnetic field decline and change on the sun. Not one. You cannot find one going back 6,000 years in Earth's history here. Society bends, shapes, morphs, and twists every single time. There's not one in the last 6,000 years that was not affected by this same change we are experiencing right now. So I don't know why it would be any different this time. Except the global elite are still trying to ride on top of that, make sure they come out the backside with the economy intact and control of the finance and the money system still intact under their control. And it's the same forces that are meeting at the Bilderberg meetings. It's the same forces that are meeting, anywhere that they have global governance structures. And I hate to say the WEF, that's such a low-hanging fruit there, like the Club of Rome, these kind of groups that are meeting in secret themselves. It's already baked in. So how do we ride through this and try to protect ourselves? But you can already see the moves they're going to make. So how is it that you swing the pendulum and counter move that on this side of information flow? That's why they want to control your thoughts. Can you share them with others? Perhaps. It would be a verbal thing. We're going to go back to verbal communication, ham radio. Because I'll tell you one thing, a friend of mine, Thomas, who I recently met, who knew me from my work here, he heads up part of the ham club right here local where I live. So they were inviting me to go on a fox hunt this last Saturday. And a fox hunt is they put a beacon out somewhere in the forest and you triangulate in on it and then you find it. But you work as groups of 3 and you triangulate in on this thing. So ham radio is going to be useful for some points, but if they ever want to find out where your signal's coming from, it doesn't take very long. Hours, if you keep broadcasting, they can hone in on you pretty quick. If you head off a few messages and then you stop broadcasting, but there's no repeating cycle of when you broadcast and you keep your transmission to a couple minutes and then you move to a different place, they'll have a very difficult time following you. So learning what they were trying to teach me about the action that goes on in trying to triangulate something versus a static continuous broadcasting transmitter, something way different than trying to track it down when you transmit every couple hours, not on a schedule either. So, I mean, thoughts are going to be things that they don't want conveyed, because if you can explain the truth of what's happening in this madness, that is what's so scary for them, because that might actually spread. And once people understand the whole inner workings and mechanism, which I claim nothing to understand at all. I'm saying at least I understand a sliver of it and how it's being used through time immemorial history, back even through this cycle right now. So, Ransom, I'll leave it there. I know I ramble a bit.
Well, I think you said something, like what's different now. And I think, a lot is actually different now on this reset that we're going to have. When you compare like the technology of pre-Diluvian civilizations to now, it's quite a little bit different because we don't know what kind of tech they were using. But I find it fascinating that, with more and more people studying stuff like the Great Pyramid of Giza, they have one theory out there, at least an engineer called Christopher Dunn, that the Great Pyramid of Giza is actually just a machine. And it seems like, he doesn't postulate what the machine would be used for, just that the machine was there and that it's obviously a machine. Now he goes on to explain how, there's under the pyramid, there's a big chamber that allows the Nile River to come in, and the hydraulic design of it, the water hits the top of the limestone roof in there, and it sends out a pulse. Now up in the other upper portions of the pyramid, they found out that, there's residue of sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid and zinc oxide. And when you mix those two together, you get hydrogen. And when the hydrogen starts bouncing around at high speeds because of this hydraulic resonance that's going on underneath the pyramid, it starts producing X-rays. And those X-rays go out of this tunnel, and they go out, about 2.5 light years away to a destination in a solar system that is pointed directly at. Now, if you were back then and you wanted to send a message to another civilization, but you didn't have access to large amounts of rare earth elements and other things that would jumpstart your technological need there, you'd have to build these giant things to equate to the technology. So let's say you did that for the pyramid and you sent off a message for whatever reason. Now the reason I bring that up is because nowadays things are totally different. If you remember in the 60s and 70s, we were putting up these giant telescopes to look out into space, these big radio telescopes. Nowadays you can put thousands of little tiny small devices and make a giant telescope out of small electronics, thanks to rare earth elements and the microchip. We're in a totally different era than just, the last century of building things. So when you put that into, this scenario of another reset, you realize that maybe the last couple times they couldn't just reset that way. So they had to think in long terms, which was to build a whole society, to give an infrastructure, to build technology of a certain degree that they could use it. Now we're at that point. They have that technology. And people think, well, if we get one burp off the sun, it'll put us back into the Stone Age. You are absolutely wrong. They know that these cycles happen. They know the dangers, and they're not worried about it. That's why the Air Force said they're going to, totally change over their Air Force to a complete AI system. And the reason they're not worried about it is because they have shielding technologies. And they have the disposable technology of small devices versus these giant big devices that it took in the past and the distant past. Now you can have them on little bitty devices. So think Starlink. You put up, 1,000 Starlink satellites. You get a little burp off the sun. Over half of them fall off on the daytime side of the Earth, and they just plummet to Earth. But on the night side, some of them survive. Guess what? Next month they put up more of them. They're disposable. So the idea that we'd be completely reset, like in any other reset, is kind of naive, because we do have technologies. We have DUMBs. They have redundant systems to just pop back up after any of these disasters, short of, like a giant bull light or something smacking the Earth that they have no control over. But as far as the sun, putting out any kind of normal, electromagnetic interference on us, we know how to reset right away. So they're not worried about that. And I think that's the difference now. And if you think about it this way, you remember in the 80s, there was a rumor going around that they were putting cameras in the cable boxes, and, people would take them apart and they'd find out, well, this one does have a camera and this one does have a mic, but the vast majority of them, they just had a little infrared sensor, and everybody was like, oh, well, that's a conspiracy theory. A few years later, they admit that the little infrared sensor in your old televisions and your old cable boxes, VCRs, etc., could be reversed and used as an infrared camera to look at what you're doing in your house. Now, that's old. Now, think about what's going on right now, and think about in conjunction with their ideas that they're putting out. They want to chip people. They want to get a direct connection. But even without that direct connection, they basically have eyes and ears in every single household that has technology around the world. And, you think about these ideas like magnetic fields changing the behavior of people. Well, that's completely possible right now. They could put out little devices in every bit of commercial electronics that you use. And in fact, we have found out that they have done things like that. My Samsung television even came with a little warning in the handbook that said to beware of what I say in front of it, because they share that information with third parties, and i.e. governments, whatever. So now we're in a time where they can turn this whole thing off. It doesn't matter what the sun does really in a short term. They'll be up and back and going with their new system within months. And I kind of talked about that last time. If you think about some kind of worldwide devastating event, whatever it is, a plague, a bolide, a series of volcanic eruptions, any of that stuff, when it's over, within months, they can come back and set up little temporary places where they have technology that they've stored, and they can be back in action in minutes, days, weeks, months. They're already going. Now, you compare that with the civilization that's out there that doesn't have, of course, continuity of government resources. Everything in their house is going to fry. If something like that happened, a lot of people are going to be set back to zero. There's going to be no information available to the public as far as what people are, grown to depend on, the internet, which is basically a hard drive for our brain now. And that's the way the new generations are being brought up, that they don't know anything. They have to refer back to the hard drive of the internet. Now, imagine what happens when they reset this, or nature resets it for them. They're already ready to go. They already have the cognitive infrastructure ready to go to put up, new satellites, new 5G towers. All of that stuff can be done really fast. If you've ever watched an electrician's crew after a hurricane or tornado come and clean up the area and put up the electricity back, you know that they can do that. And that's old technology. So you can imagine wireless, solar-powered, battery-operated stuff that they just pop up all over the place, and all of a sudden they have an infrastructure. They have intel. They know where people are going, where they're not going. They know what people are doing. Now, this would happen, obviously, after they let civilization go to the wolves. And I have a feeling that that's a major part of their reset, is to get things so bad that, the classic safety nets of civilization collapse and people turn on each other, and we have a dog-eat-dog world. That's a major part of it. So if people could break out of the matrix for just a second and realize the amount of manipulation that's happening to them, I think that there would be a major backlash at this reset. And like I've said before, for every technology that they've created, some kid, smart kid somewhere, or just a hobbyist figures out the systems and figures out how to manipulate it. So it's not like there's no hope for some kind of underground secret society type stuff of civilizations now. And what would that be? Would it be that what our history actually is? Because if they're trying to hide the history that we already have, and there's numerous examples of dogma in either archaeology or genetics or climate sciences, where they say things that are factually untrue and provably untrue, and still browbeat you over the head with it. Imagine if you no longer have that information to fall back on to argue, because you know better, because you have historic documentation or books or hard drives or whatever it is. That'll be the problem that happens with this reset, is that there's only going to be pockets of people that thought ahead save their technologies and hide them, Faraday cage them, and different things as far as the digital renaissance that humans have had. Now, as far as nuts and bolts mechanics and things like that, I think that, they waited for the right generation, or at least the right time period, where most of the people with know-how, most of the tool users, most of the engineers, most of the jacks of all trade are all now in their either middle age or they're passing away. And then you have a worldwide pandemic to set it off. So you could see a worldwide loss of historical and knowledge that was given, inherited knowledge and wealth is just disappearing. When that's finally accomplished, which I think will be in the next 10 years, then you will see some of this more dramatic 1984 nightmare of systems that they have been perfecting since, I'm going to say, the mid 50s, with the introduction of a television in every home.
Yeah, because how far ahead is what we see out here right now? I mean, with 30 years behind the tech, that's already, what you're referencing, already in there for continuity government, what, 20, 30 years is ahead of what they've actually released out to the public? I mean, just to put it in the simplest of sense here, I was talking about hemp biofuels today with somebody. I was talking to a guy, Andrew, and they had a project where they were growing like 10,000 acres of hemp up in Washington State, and the amount of revenue coming off of that and the different regulation, et cetera. Well, then we got into the diesel mechanic and that sort of thing too, and so it goes along right with that same conversation thread. So think about this for just a moment. How many diesel mechanics do you know? How many people do you know that could know how to grow hemp, which would be a really, really easy to process oil? Far easier than a lot of other ones. Literally crush and go. But who would have the skill to actually put some sort of expeller press crush together to crush those seeds in expeller press? Even using a hydraulic press. I mean, could you figure it out? Well, you're going to get a certain amount of overflow with a certain amount of pressure, and you're going to need a capture device, and you're going to need a filter there. I mean, even the rudimentary skills of literally growing hemp, which is one of the easiest things to grow on the planet. Now, here's the thing about hemp. You want it to be as seedy as you can possibly get it. You want that thing overflowing with seeds. You want it to be seedier than sorghum head out in the field. But the guys who are growing it and the girls who are growing it for, usables to sell in the recreational arena want zero seeds. So, it's a completely different animal than what you think in a traditional, marijuana arena. So you take it out, and let's say you're getting 3 pounds or up to 5 pounds per plant of seed. Like, who in a reset world would have the capability to grow it, expel it, press it, crush it, take the seed, and then take that seed cake and then give it to the animals, but then you keep the oils. But then who has the wherewithal to repair damaged machinery to be able to put that even through a very, very simple diesel motor that we're using today? And what kind of fuels could you distill out something? I know that would be alcohol, so you really couldn't use that. It'd have to be a distillate. So, I mean, what are these basic rudimentary skills to go from field to fuel to a very basic diesel engine? Even if you were running like just a farm tractor from, say, the 1960s or something, to go from that field with your hemp oil into that tractor. And if there was something missing, a spark plug, the gap was too wide or whatever, there's a million things, really rudimentary motors, even at that level of skill or motor repair from the 1960s on a basic farm tractor, who would have that skill after a reset? I mean, really, you're talking like 1 in a million people. Even in today's world, Ransom, you just mentioned, like, how many people have the trade skills that have diesel repair, but also have the agricultural background to be able to do both? To harvest that, to turn it into the fuel, to put it into the engine. Like for me, learning how to distill through my friend who has an actual license because they have a distillery here in East Tennessee, so I learned from them. To go from that process of taking the grain or the fruit, taking it in, mashing it up, getting it right, waiting, 10, 12, however many days you want to get for the alcohol content, turbo yeast or Lavalon yeast, whatever it is, distill it out, take out that methanol, which is then, boom, you got your medicines. You got your cleaning solution. You got your rubbing alcohol. But then you got the extra drinkable stuff, and then you have the things that you can use for tinctures. I mean, even to go through that process of taking fruit or, some sort of grain and turning it into alcohol that's usable in itself for medicine, and then tinctures, and then, recreational tradables or usables. That line, that chain itself, there's very few people who know how to do that. When I talk to people now and I go, oh yeah, I was distilling up at their distillery up the other day. They have this big 200-gallon tank, and I was checking it out, but we were using 5-gallon, and they're like, well, I don't know how to do that. And I really have rarely run into anybody who knows how to do that. It's a very, very select crowd and a very niche hobby. Same with diesel mechanics. Same with those with, creating different oils, biodiesel oils, etc. So you kind of hit it on the head. Even if we go back to the most rudimentary of machinery and the most basic of fuels, how many people would be able to navigate that in a post-reset world? I really don't think that many. So then, at the behest, you're right back into the system again because you have no idea how to do that. And then thinking about electrical generation, if we do go on a power grid down here for some time, I mean, really, how much do you have for extra electrical supply off solar panels? And, some days are going to be cloudy. You're not going to be able to use your generator very long because your fuels will disappear really quick. So then what's that whole rotation of storing power, using essential devices, and then, having some sort of semi-normal life because, washing clothes and drying them at that point will be out of the question. Using your oven will be out of the question. You'll have to go back to using wood and figuring something out on a hot plate. It just draws too much electric. You just literally won't be able to barely use your refrigerator at all. You'll be back down to the old college dorm fridge at best. And you might be able to run that for just a couple hours a day to get it cool, but that won't last very long. The cool always goes out of those smaller fridges really fast. So even something like to walk through a modern day grid down for weeks or a month or whatever, how your lifestyle would need to change just to even cope with that, even if you were ready for it to cope with it. Rechargeable lights, yeah, that's great at night, but I mean, even the basics, hot water, your water heater is going to draw too much power if you have a limited system. So you're going to have to integrate it. Electronics, communication devices, yeah, you can recharge those, but the rest of your life, you're going to have to put some sweat equity into it. And who has thought about, which I did already, by the way, this is why I'm bringing it up, who has thought about buying a washboard or two in case one breaks? Do you have any soaps to go along with that washboard? I live near the Amish. I see how they live. They're using the washboard. So I'm thinking, I don't have one of those. But they do have hand-cranked tubs that they wash things in. It's like a hand-cranked one that I've seen. It's going to be better than using something that has more dirt in it where you're actually going to need the washboard. But think about washboard. Who has that on their prepping list? Washboard and soap for that. We're going to take a way step back into the 1800s again until the electricity comes back on. And you realize the value of how much time, energy that electricity does save us in our modern world. And just even to get the basics done of hygiene and cooking and food and heating water. And when I say hygiene, I'm talking about washing clothes and bathing, etc. I mean, the majority of your day is going to be spent just taking care of the basics, just to keep you alive so you don't get diseased. It's really a whole, can of worms to think about producing hemp to have the biodiesel to run a farm tractor. Yeah, most people aren't going to be ready for this. And I question if I am too sometimes about, really how far back could you wander in time here for months before some sort of system comes back online? At that point, how quickly would you want to jump at it? And what would you sacrifice to jump to get back in that system? Because that's really what it's going to be about. We can prep till we're blue in the face here. But when it really comes down to it and you need to start using all this stuff, life's going to get really way more complicated and difficult and way more physical labor than you anticipated. And would you trade that back to get back into that new system? And would you get chipped so you could have electricity back? Because this is kind of the way I see it. They're going to pull this and bait and switch you in there. There's going to be some requirements for you to get electricity and fuel back in your life. Are you willing to trade for that? I guess that's the question. Ransom, we got a minute and a half. Take us out, man. Oh, we're going on the break right now. I guess we don't have a minute and a half. We'll be right back. After the break, Ransom Godwin and myself here, David DuByne, Mini Ice Age Conversations. We'll come back. Best of the week. Meteor fireballs lighting up the skies. We'll see you then.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. The 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think, everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
When we're talking about these seeds, and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way.
All right. Thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne. Ransom Godwin right here with me tonight also. Before the break, I was talking about, if the power goes out and systems break down for a few months, people are going to be begging to get it back. So what are they going to be willing to trade to come on to the system again with the electricity and fuel? It's not going to be a free restart. Of course, there's going to be something asked and requested of those that want to return to the system that allows them comfort in life. I assure you, if I take away your power and your fuel for 2 months, you will be begging and doing anything to get it back. So, Ransom, I appreciate you coming back for the second hour. I don't know. I was trying to get an answer before we went to break on what you think people would be willing to trade to get their comforts of life back, and what they would be willing to give up in terms of their souls to get that back for the comfort. But anyway, Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us discuss these topics tonight. Anybody out there, Revolution Radio, right there, donate tab in the top navigation bar. And away we go with the program, Ransom. So, yeah, I guess that's the question to start off the new hour with.
Yeah, you said soul, right? Well, I was about to answer it. Well, they'll do it. They'll sell their soul. They'll trade their soul right away for it. 100 channels of cable and 100 flavors of ice cream, they will sell their soul because, think about it. I think it's since the 80s, mid-80s, our whole society has become addicted, and they didn't realize that they were addicted to these, bad behaviors until it's too late. And now everybody wonders why they're, ill or sick or malnourished, or they got this disorder or that disorder. And they don't realize, in the older world, there just weren't that many people with all of these conditions. As a matter of fact, some of the first kids that got cancer, there were scientists flying from all over the world to look at them. It was so weird, so rare. Now, think about it right now. Is it rare now? I mean, how many people know one person in their family that either died, has cancer, or is worried about it, and they're already, talking to the doctor about what they should do so they don't get it. There's just this layer of unhealthiness that has, kind of been entrenched in our society since about the mid 80s. And, you were talking about time and, how long would it take for this to get back to the way it was? How long would, it take you to deal with things shutting off? Are you really prepared for that? Are you really going to wash your clothes like on the washing board? And, are you really going to live like an Amish person? And it's funny to me when I see these interviews about people, cursing capitalism and all of this, but yet they sit there with their Chinese-made clothing and their iPhone and all of their sweatshop products and complain about capitalism. But not one of them is going off to live like the Amish. Not one of those is going to, save the world by going to traditional living. They're not washing their clothes with a washboard or nothing like that right now to save the planet or any of that stuff. But think about this. So what are we going to do really? I mean, we talk about it a lot of a what if and, these scenarios, and a lot of people like to think that they are prepped and they're going to be fine. And but what is the reality of civilization actually shutting off? Because, we kind of delved into it a little bit last week, talking about how people live in the cities that don't have any food in the refrigerator. Everything is order or takeout. Everything is delivered. Everything comes off an app. They don't have grocery stores. They don't know how to shop. And then you get into these things like we were just talking about a minute ago as, the generation of jack of all trades is kind of gone, or the last remnants are alive. We're the middle-aged people, Generation X, some of the boomers, and we're now in this time where we're losing this inherited knowledge. And I want to ask people, that's great if you know things, if you know how to do this and you know how to do that, but are you teaching anyone? Are you teaching any other person? I mean, and of course, I'm not counting you, David, because you got a YouTube show that's all about showing people different things and stuff like that. And I like to do that. And a lot of the circle that we're in likes to volunteer skills, methods, techniques, tricks on how to have a sustainable off-grid living, now in this world, not even worrying about whether things are going to collapse. But let's do a mind experiment right now and say the lights go off tomorrow and you don't even get to know why. So there's no why in this scenario. So you could just don't worry about why. Don't worry about nuke, EMT, did something happen, whatever. It doesn't really matter for you where you live. It's just the fact that the power's off and it's not coming back on. So that means you have X amount of food in your home. You have whatever you've stored. If you're, more of a prepper, you probably have backup safety nets like storable foods, or maybe you grow foods and you jar them, or whatever you're doing. So there's a time limit and there's a time clock set right then when the power goes off. So those people know they got X amount of time, probably a month, 2 months, depending on, what happens as far as society goes. But as far as if nobody hurts them, robs them, or does anything to them, they know they have an X amount of time to eat and think about their scenario and their situation and deal with it. But I'm going to say 98% of the rest of the population does not. They did not. They didn't think about it. They didn't prepare for it. And, their attitude is they'll take it. But think about this. So what would you do if the lights turned off tomorrow? See, I've been thinking about this a lot. And, with this year's gardening, I've been really looking at the soil and the earth and the plants and the seeds and thinking, what if this is it? What if this is all I get right here? Or this is all that's going to happen for me and my family this year? There's no other resources coming. So, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, really, there's only 2 or 3 things there that are going to grow within, in enough time to eat it. So I'm thinking one of the most essential survival things that you should have is like, I'm going to say 100,000 seeds of different kinds and specific kinds. Like, as far as, what can you, like, say you had 20 days of food. That's it. It's gone. What do you plant? What do you start doing right then? So, like there's radishes. Okay, there's radishes. Very, very nutritious stuff. The leaves, the radishes. Matter of fact, we just had a salad the other day of radishes I pulled up out of the garden. It was delicious. The radishes were great. The leaves were great, and they're high in all these B vitamins and stuff that you're not going to be buying from the store. But besides radishes, what else is there? Like, how do you plan out a 30-day scenario? Say you only have food at your house that's going to last you 30 days max, not counting any kind of interference from other people, but just 30 days for you to figure it out how to feed your family. What do you do? Let's say you're in a remote area and you have a little more time and you can exclude the possibility of people interfering with you. So what do you put in the ground? Say it's springtime. Let's say it happens in spring. What do you put in the ground to have all around security of food within 30 days? Now, I named one radishes. That's a great one. That's one that will fulfill your at least taste buds and a portion of your vitamin intake. But then what else is there? There's squash, but squash doesn't pop up in 20 days. So you already had to have that growing. You know what I mean? So what else is there that in 30 days, regardless of what you got in your house, you can be eating at the end of the month? And this is a scenario you should think about, because all of the scenarios, all of them, war, famine, plague, something supernatural, something natural. I didn't mean supernatural. That was a Freudian slip. But, something like a impact on the other side of the planet where you're just dark, or maybe it's a bunch of volcanoes go off, or maybe El Nino just keeps hammering and everybody floods in areas that never have water, and then other people are dealing with this. So you're going to have a way to have your own plants growing regardless of the surrounding environment. Also, like as far as like weather, you're going to have to figure out how are you going to do that. So David, what would you do? All you get is, I'm sure you're prepped. So let's pretend you're less prepped, and all you got is like a regular refrigerator full of a week's worth of groceries, like most normal people do. They have at least a week in their house, some bread, some butter, milk, but things will run out in a month. So in that time, you need to figure out what are you going to put in the ground and what are you going to start doing for 30 days later. It's make it or break it, live or die, starvation, or, you're going to eat and you're going to feel all right.
Oh, I'd probably go with the beets and arugula, okra, broccolini, which grows probably 5 times faster than broccoli. And see, I'm trying to tap in on things where you can still cut it, where you don't have to harvest the entire plant, where you could just cut a portion of it and it will regrow itself. Cherry tomatoes, nasturtiums, and rosella. Like, those types of things are going to be enough to get you your vitamins and micronutrients, not so much the proteins. And this is where, if you got to have some of your chickens ready or have something like this, because you have to think about what can you bring in as a protein source. That you're going to have to forage for that somewhere, and your diet's going to have to change. I mean, you can maybe find some nuts or whatever, but if you're in charge of your own garden, that's one of the things. There's not so many protein sources. But again, the beets, not only can the sugar beets, but you can eat the leaves while they're growing. And I must say, our chickens, our turkeys, the geese that we bought recently, and the sheep, they all love the beet leaves. They're naturally sweet. If I had Moringa oleifera, if I had some Moringa seeds, I would definitely 100% grow that. Within a couple of weeks, you have just the most magical nonstop. The more you trim it, the more it grows leaf, and that leaf is actually a superfood. They call it the miracle tree. We're talking about leafy content here. Like I say, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, etc., to keep that at least edge of your body going. The moringa is going to take a couple months to bring out some oil in the seeds there. The broccolini, although it's a broccoli, it is a family of broccoli. You're not going to get that much protein. And I keep coming back to some of these same ideas there, Ransom. Like, where are your oil fats going to come from? Obviously, you can do sunflower, but that's going to take, months to get that. You can grow your own corn, obviously, different types of corn. It doesn't have to be the yellow dent corn. I mean, there's all types of heirloom and, different types of original corn strains. I got a really nice purple one. I got a beautiful black one. I got a starburst type. But vegetative matter and protein and oils is something very, very different. And then you're talking about, what's your fishing skill like? Can you go down and get a snapping turtle out of the pond? Like, we have snapping turtles in our pond down here. We always throw out a steel line with a hook on it. One of my neighbors does every night, and he continually catches turtles. I don't know, it's like a nonstop turtle farm over there or whatever. There's always snapping turtles that they're catching. Fish, what are you going to do for your oils? You're going to have to be catching things like ducks, and then what are you going to do? Render down fat? Do you know how to do that? I mean, how many animals of your own are going to sacrifice? Because we've got 3 sheep, but we're trying to breed those for more, and those sheep take a little bit of time to raise too. Like, if you got nothing and you're not prepared and you have no extra oil, I get those 1 gallon coconut oil things, put them in a cool, dry place, or I put them in the freezer if I cut them down into smaller jars. But the oils and the proteins, man, this is going to be the real thing that a lot of people are going to have a problem with. And if it's not toward the end of summer, you're not going to be able to really find like the hickory nuts and the walnuts and these sort of things that you'd be looking for. It's going to take a minute for the nuts to come in at the end of the year. And the fruits too, a lot of that fruit doesn't ripen up. Like our blackberries and raspberries, they won't be, even though they, still have the primocanes and, it's really starting to fruit out this year, it's still going to be another month or so plus before we can get any fruit out of that. So again, it brings us back down into, you can rapidly grow a bunch of vegetative matter that'll keep you healthy because you're going to get the vitamins that you need. But in terms of oils, fats, and proteins, that's a whole different thing to think about. And again, You can be prepared, but then what level are you? And you really, we've talked about this many a time, Ransom. Like, I'm going to tell everybody out there again. If somebody's coming to steal your farm animals and that's what you have for your life to keep you alive, you're going to have to make those decisions in your head before you even get in that situation on what you're going to do to defend that animal and your access to life. You know, this is the way it's going to go in some places. Not all. But I'm saying some of us, some of you, could be me, not sure. It's just the way that things roll out. But some of us are going to have to make that choice. And hopefully you've already come to grips with that and you've processed it through your mind, and you're not going to waste time trying to process it. That you're already very clear on what steps and what actions you're willing to take and live with to make sure that your life continues. Because I absolutely rest assured, if you have, like, we have these 3 sheep out here, we have a mother and the 2 ewes, they're actually coming up. They're about half the size, the bigger than them, you know, getting up there the size of the mother now. If we were to lose those, that would be our meat and protein source and the fat source. So you'd have to think about that comparatively, because we're going to breed those sheep out and we're not going to harvest those. Those are breeding sheep that are just for meat for somebody else that will trade us something. But then you start, what if somebody comes and wants to take all your chickens? Now, having chickens is something completely different than having a garden. I mean, how many people already have chickens? It's a learning curve to get them up and running and, you know, egg producing. But once you learn it and you've been doing it for a year, a couple of years, it's not as scary. But if somebody's going to come in and say, I'm taking all your chickens, all of them, all your egg laying birds and all your meat birds, you're going to have to make that choice again right then and right there. And there's going to be no second chance. And you won't have a chance to reverse the clock and go, well, I should have done it. Damn it, I'm going to try it. I should have done it, and I'll come back. I want to try and make a different decision. Nope. You're going to have one chance and one choice, one time. And unfortunately, you know, some of us are going to have to deal with that. Others won't. But it's going to be a roll of the dice, I guess. But you have to keep in mind what Ransom was talking about here, just even how important the garden's going to get. But then you're going levels of orders of magnitude of importance up into the proteins and the oils to keep your brain functioning correctly. That is truly the point of death or life. If you don't have any oils or proteins, you could have as much green matter as you want. You could eat veggies until you pee green, you know, and you're just not going to make it. You're not going to have enough in your body. It's going to require something else. Now, where do the carbohydrates come from? And that's something else to think about too, like quick growing greens. That's one thing. But to put something up that's going to be like a 60-day crop are you going to grow sorghum? Well, you're going to need a lot of fertilizer. You're going to grow corn? You're going to need a lot of fertilizer. You're going to go for wheat or barley or buckwheat. Actually, Ransom, I think I would go with buckwheat, actually. Final answer on that. I've grown a ton of buckwheat on our property here, and it's pretty fast. Double rotation crop. We usually let it go until it gets flowered, and then we'll cut it down and we'll feed it out to the chickens or something. I only have maybe like a quarter acre, an eighth of an acre, but it grows double rotation crop. You cut it, and then it grows back. As long as you cut it while it's still warm, it'll grow back. We did let it go to seed one time. And, processing the seed, we took a few square feet and pulled all the seed off of it. And even to get that cleaned up enough so you could eat it. And then we didn't even de-shell it. We just sprouted it, which is a totally different thing. So, buckwheat would be my answer on trying to get a fast growth grain crop. Otherwise, wheat's going to take you a while. Corn, forever. You don't have time. And see, here's the thing about it, too. If you're growing this and it does come down to that kind of situation, you're going to have to guard your food all the time. There's going to be sneakies that are going to come in and try to get that in the middle of the night and kind of thing. I remember the 2008-9 financial crisis. I was traveling in Thailand, and at that time the Army was out in the evening all the time because people were coming in with the harvesters and stealing people's acreage of rice at night. It was coming into the harvest season, dry season. And people would run in there with their harvesters and harvest an entire 1 or 2 acres and then just, go off with it. And farmer would come back in the morning and their entire field had been harvested. the food stolen. So then they put the army out in the evenings to patrol the streets or actually the more remote roads. But, security of that food is a whole different aspect, and it's going to require a community, because you cannot stay up 24 hours a day to keep pushing and doing all the work in the heat and in the cold and in the dreary days and the rainy days and whatever kind of weather. You're going to be more than a mailman. You're going to be a grower of food, and to try to take care of your animals and grow food and have gardens and all these things, and then try to protect it at night. Then you need a group of people to do that, because there's always going to be somebody. And like you said before, it scares me because I'm not so much worried about the city folk coming out here in the first weeks of something like this happening. It's the scumbag drug users on meth down the way over there that know every square inch of these areas because they grew up as kids around here riding dirt bikes and stuff, that are going to be the ones that are going to probably be the most troublesome. It won't be somebody from the bigger city. It's going to be your local drugged out heads first that are going to be causing the most problems. Then you got Billy Bob over here, and you shot my brother or whatever, and he came in to steal the food, bro, and he pulled something on us, so he got what he was at. And then, you got my brother. That's my brother. That's my kin. Then it's like, then you got the Hatfield and McCoys going on and stuff. So, where does it draw the line then? And there's it's going to be like quite the interesting world moving through. So if you think you're out in the countryside and you're just going to whoop-diddy-doo, hang through, and I'm just going to grow my food and chill, and nobody's going to find me out here. Oh, yes, they will, but it'll be the locals first. Surely will, because you might think there's people living in the countryside that are all prepped out and everything. I'd say there's 50% of them that are potato chip eaters that have zero things in the fridge except maybe a 6-pack, methed out as can be, not prepared, broke as a joke, and when they get desperate, they're all armed up too, and they're going to get their little clicks and go, hey, remember when we were riding? You remember we used to ride through the forest down over there? There's a couple houses down there we could pop in and it's not going to be how you might think it's going to play out. It might play out very, very differently than you might think it would. So I don't know, man. That's too much information to answer one little specific question. I should have just stopped when I said beets, arugula, radishes, okra, broccolini, cherry tomatoes, nasturtiums, rosella, and buckwheat. But I didn't. I'm one of those guys.
Right. Well, the whole thing is that depending on where you live, you got to be able to call it quits and realize that it's not working. So if you don't own a large piece of land that's pretty remote, odds are this is what's going to happen. The power's going to go out. Everybody's going to wait. While they do that, they're going to go shopping while things, they can still get stuff. But then those stores are going to throw that food out within 16 hours. Then there's no food coming after that. And at the homes, well, they weren't prepared, so they didn't store water. And their plumbing doesn't work now. So even if they have a garden, what's going to happen as follows is people are going to start wigging out about their utilities not working. So they're going to be infighting in even in the little towns across America, millions and millions of people that depend on municipal water and think that's where water comes from is out of that little tap. Unfortunately, they're going to find out that when the power goes off, the water goes off. And when the water goes off, well, you're basically living in the Stone Age, and people are going to have to wrap their head around the fact that depending on where they live, it's time to leave. So take example where I live. I have a nice little lot here. It's in a temperate climate. It only rains basically on monsoon season. If we have a monsoon season between July and August, 90% of the rain comes then. The rest of the year, it doesn't rain that much. So if you don't live by a water source or have a water source or have a well, you don't have water. And if you don't have water, you can't grow anything, not radishes, not nothing. You're not going to grow anything. So you're basically going to have to live the style of Native Americans that lived in the Four Corners area. And think about how big the Four Corners area really is. It's 4 of the biggest states in the U.S. all of that area, there's nothing to eat except for rabbits. There's, there's miscellaneous wildlife out there. There's antelope and some deer and etc. Rabbit, squirrels. And what's going to happen immediately is, well, people are going to figure out that they have to eat those things because there's no meat and there's no vegetation. And if it's, any other time than spring, there literally is nothing to eat. So in the springtime, you can eat all you want of yucca blooms and yucca stalks when they first come out. They're like an asparagus. But other than that, unless you know the plants, you're going to starve to death. And believe it or not, it's a lot harder to hunt rabbit than you think it is, especially in the desert. They hear you coming from a long ways off. So you have to be really sneaky and basically do it like the natives did, which is just to throw a big rock or a club at it and hope you get dinner. Now, obviously, that's not going to work out for millions of people. So they're not going to sit around trying to guard their little, half an acre lot with no water on it in the middle of the desert, because it's a lost cause. People are going to ransack what there is. And then after that, there's going to be nothing. So if you happen to live in an area where you're remote, it rains, there's an ability to grow stuff. Even then, you're only going to grow stuff, for a little while. And then you're going to have to think about the next step of this scenario, which is hiding. Because if things really go down in a permanent way, like a great reset way, like we're talking about, something substantial, not just a temporary inconvenience of society, but like a shutdown for any period of time, it's only going to take, I'm going to say 3 to 6 months for everyone else to die. They're going to be fighting. They're going to be doing this and that. A lot of people are going to try to depend on the government. But guess what? The government can't do anything either if they're rolling with the power being off, and they're not going to use their resources for you. Unfortunately, after all of these millions of people paid in for years, that money's gone. It's for them. It's not for you. So we're left with a Native American style living, if you live in America, basically, which is hunter-gatherer. Back in the day, you're going to have to, all of the country boys in the South and anywhere out there know they're going to be squirrel hunting. But guess what happens a year after that? There ain't no squirrels. There's no rabbits. There's no deer. There's no nothing. So if you can't maintain an area and maintain animals and maintain a small amount of gardening, the population is going to be greatly reduced. So what we're really talking about is if it goes down, you have to survive 6 months, at least 6 months, until at least the majority of the chaos is pretty much over. And I think the elites know that. So that's why I think what they're going to do is systematic shutdowns. In other words, they're going to pick areas to shut down to completely destabilize and bring it to its knees, and then they'll move it because they know that, they'll lose everything. And then the people that are left are all going to be the thinkers, the people that know how to do things, the people that prep, the people that banded together. And one thing you said right there is really the realism. If you live in a city or you live in a town and you don't own land and you don't farm and you don't know the farmers and you don't know, you're really making a mistake, because there are going to be communities form. And if you're not part of those communities, you are going to die. Because I don't think a single person, unless they're a survivalist expert competing with millions of other people out there, are going to last too long living off the land. Now, myself, I'm pretty confident, but even then I've gone out camping with almost nothing, and I've realized there's a harsh reality out there about finding things. And, I've had the intention of going out and thinking I was going to go out there and, take my water straw and go find me some rabbits to eat and find some edibles. Guess what? It was not easy at all. And that's just with me doing it. No one else, really doing it. Now imagine millions of other people desperate, trying to find every little scrap of food that there is available. And they're going to be forming groups. And that's what's going to be scary. So we better hope as a whole nation, as a whole world, that the elite don't get away with their plan, and somehow civilization on the local scale fixes this whole bad turn towards extinction type living, which is what they're giving you so that you help their plan. We have to go back to a different way, and there's no other way around it. Otherwise, they have it all planned out, and they're basically waiting for everyone to destroy themselves. And all they have to do is pull the plug and turn off the key. Now, whether that happens naturally from something from the sun, I don't think they care. I think they've already planned it. They already have think tanks that think out all of these things that we talk about with some really, really intelligent people. There's no question about it that they hire, some of the smartest people on earth to be in these think tanks. They sit around and they think of these scenarios exactly like we do. Like, well, what if we just turn off the power to the Southwest and we say a hacker did it? What would happen in a week? Well, in a week, you're going to see protests, rioting, burglars. You're going to see massive violence and things on fire. And then what happens in 2 weeks? Well, it's going to die down because the authorities are going to come out and squash that. And then, I hate to say it, but portions of people are just going to start dying, not from being murdered by anybody, but elderly people are going to die because there's no air conditioner or there's no heating. There's diabetic people that are going to die because they can't keep their medicine refrigerated. There's going to be people that depend on medication being delivered to live. And all these people are going to die. That's just a harsh reality about it. So what we have to do is what we've talked about is really form little secret societies of people that know how to do things and that share their knowledge with each other. And not only that, but keep it documented, because, you're not going to just keep it on the computer. That's not a real thing. You're going to have books. You're going to have a wealth of knowledge more than the previous generations, because like we talked about before, the last couple generations really didn't hand down their knowledge to the people that are going to be running things. And that's the scariest thing. It seems like the elite knew exactly which generations to pull all of these programs. And it's so eerie to think that even ancient civilizations were warning us about this cycle. I don't know what's going to happen, but evidently there is something documented that happens on a cycle, and it's around this time. And it seems like the elite know about it. Everything's being reset. So what we have to do is do the counter reset, which is, not only learn things for yourself, but you have to pass on that knowledge to somebody younger than you. Unfortunately, if you don't have kids, you need to find some kid that's like an apprentice. And things have to go back the way they used to be, where everybody that did a trade had a younger person learning that trade. And you think about that, say we went back to the 20s, you could go to almost any family, and whatever the dad knew, all of his boys knew. Whatever the mom knew, all of the daughters knew it. You know what I mean? They knew it because they had to know it. They had to take part in the chores. They had to take part in keeping track of the garden. They had to keep track of the house. The men had to learn how to fix things. They got their kids to do it. They learned the tools, what the names of the tools are, all of these things. These are things of our culture that are disappearing. And it seems to be that these think tanks have thought about this, and they realize now is the time to pounce. Now is the time to get their youth. And it's a famous thing, like Hitler, Biden, even George Bush, they've all said the same kind of statement that your kids don't belong to you. They belong to the country. And the reason for that is because, just like the bad guy over there in Germany said, I don't care what you think. I don't care what you believe in. I just need your kids. And in 20 years, I run the country. And that's exactly what they're doing now. And that's why you see these color revolution type things that are going on, and the people that are taking part of it don't even know with the ideas that they're doing. They don't know where it came from. They don't know that this has happened. They never think about this idea about, we have this supposed free market capitalist society here. When the Berlin Wall fell, which way did people run? Well, they didn't run the other way. So obviously that type of system is not a good idea. Unfortunately, the people that are running the entire world think it is better, because the population is that part of their equation that they want to get rid of. And what better way to do that than just turn everything off and allow the dog-eat-dog world, the rat race, to take over? And just like you were talking about before with the experiments with mice, well, a lot of people don't want to think about this, but mice are a lot like us in every way. They're kind of the prototype for the the mammal type species. So there's a reason they use mice and rodents for testing. So if they can do that to them, they are most likely doing it to us now and have been. And one good example is, the flicker rates. They tested that on primates until they figured out how to lull them into a lethargic state or excite them with anger or make them emotional. And they took all of these technologies and they put it in the television. And then when television surpassed its era, now it's coming through the internet. And every aspect of the input that we're getting is anti-human. So it's not a rejection of technology and the benefits of it, but a rejection of the transhumanists and their plan to detach humans from their purpose on this earth, which was to go out and, fix the land, grow things, cultivate the earth. That's, not to put it in a religious term, but it seems to be our purpose here is to cultivate, not only just to survive normally, but to maintain our survival into the future. And what they're giving us is an option to turn ourselves off. And I hope the vast majority of the public doesn't choose to do what they want, which is basically to give up, give over control, give over your thought process, give over your choice, and give over your future of your children to them. And these people say what they want to do is, reduce the population until they live on a paradise earth without you, with just 500 million servants to maintain their robotic lifestyle. And then, you got to imagine, even with a society like that, it will come to another singularity where they no longer need the lower class populace. And then what's going on then? Just robots living on Earth and their green world. Speaking of that, I watched this whole thing about the recycling of plastic, and it's just another long line of lies that they tell the public. So most of the plastic you think that you're saving the earth with, they're putting it in bags. It goes to a place. Then they ship it overseas to like Malaysia, and they make this giant trash heap, or they just go dump it in the ocean. So like 80% of what you think that you're doing by these mandates by the cities, municipalities, put all your stuff in the bucket. It's all just make believe. It's all make believe to keep you distracted and make human beings forget how to be a human being. And I think we're at that singularity right now. And if you need any proof, just pick any protest about any topic and look at both sides yelling at each other. And that's what we've devolved to.
Wow. Ascending the ladder. Sheesh. Yeah, I could actually say something because I lived and worked in China for a little bit, and I understood about the trade of recyclables between the United States and China. Now, when the recycling was good in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, when the commodity super spike hit, there was a huge trade, and people really wanted you to separate that because that saved their companies from an enormous amount of work to actually take those plastics. All they had to do was to compress them in bales, caps on, rings on, whatever, labels on, didn't matter. And they would take it to China, and they would do it over there for pennies for pennies per hour to get the workers, children, slave labor, whatever over there to remove all that and get the HDPE or the LDPE into a certain pile, and then get the PET, which is the actual bottle, into another pile, and then recycle it. Cool. But there's no demand for that anymore. So pretty much Ransom hit it on the head. All that thing that you think you're recycling, it's all going into landfills now because nobody wants to buy it any longer. It's just cheaper to make it from scratch, literally. To make a virgin product from that plastic is far cheaper than to get it recycled and send it over. Now with the trade war and everything, China has just flat out refused to buy our recyclables. So even though they make you perceive that you're putting the cardboard in this thing, the glass in this thing, it all ends up in the same landfill. Crazy as that sounds, it surely is. And I had, when you started talking about what would happen if the lights go out and people go in the first day to go shopping, I can tell you a story. My sister knows the general manager of the whole, Trader Joe's chain here in Knoxville. So there's a couple of different Trader Joe's around. And I asked him that very same question because this is right when COVID started. I said, well, what happens, if the power goes out and, we got cash or we got silver and we want to come in, and you're going to make people line up out front, and then, And he's like, no, absolutely not. We'll just close everything and lock it up, because they're on a just-in-time delivery order system. And if anything goes out of the inventory that's not scanned first, it messes up their entire ordering system. So he's like, we just wouldn't sell anything. We'll just close everything off. And I was like, well, what happens if people are truly hungry out there and they need the food? And it's like, well, that's not my call. It's corporate's call. If they'll open the store, what'll happen at that point? So then you're left with kind of going to mom and pop stores. But we know most of those have been put out of business during COVID too. So think about that, what was told right there, how that reverberates through all of the large grocery chains. They're all operating on that same just-in-time deliveries barcode scanner operational system for purchasing. Can you imagine? I don't know what your biggest one is. Is it a IGA, or is it a Kroger, a Piggly Wiggly, or what's your biggest supermarket in your city? Whole Foods, like I say, Trader Joe's, anything in between. What's another one? Food Lion's another one. They're all offering those systems, so they're pretty much going to all do the same lockstep maneuver. They're going to close the doors and not let you in, even if you have cash. Now, what happens with that big juicy Target with all that food in there after people get hungry 3 or 4 days? Do you think they're going to stash National Guard troops around each and every single supermarket that's of the corporate? Not the mom and pops, the corporate. Like, how many National Guard troops would it take to station around every single large supermarket in a city across the nation? Because the police are going to be just spread so thin with the amount of crime and violence going on in a grid down after day 5. There are going to be so many home entries and all these kind of things going on. So the police won't be able to facilitate that. National Guard's probably going to be doing something else, I would imagine, than just standing around supermarkets telling you can't go in even if you have a handful of cash. They were here to protect this. Oh, we'll distribute the food ourselves. Walmart, for example, do you think they'll still remain open during that time? Of course not. Their ordering system's even more complex than most. So the misnomer, now please get that. The reason I tell you that story is a lot of people would think that's an option, that, hey, I still got cash. I got to the ATM before it went offline. I got a handful of green, baby. I'm going to go in and buy up the whole store, and then I'll trade cans of tuna fish for a favor or something. I don't know. Mow my yard for a can of tuna fish. Oh, wait, I need the fuel. Can't. All right, bring your cows over, and I'll give you a can of tuna fish and let the cows eat my yard or whatever. I need let them poo in my yard. I need the fertilizer. That's a fair trade. But whatever it turns out to be, you're not going to get that access to the food like you think you might. So see, a lot of people don't pre-plan that into their whole scenario. ATMs go down. Okay, you're lucky you got some cash out. You are absolutely going to need to know where your local vendors are, because if it's any indication on what was talked about at Trader Joe's, everything that's a large entity is going to close completely because they're so worried about their ordering system going off and out of kilter, because there's 3 cases of hot sauce that are missing now. Oh, the travesty, the warehouse won't know how to process that. And the way that he was saying, it was, it would take weeks and weeks and weeks to get everything back in, and they would have to hand count it, and the amount of extra hours of people to put on the floor to count that. And it would reverberate back to the in-city, first delivery point that it comes to before it gets shipped out to those 4 other stores in Knoxville. That would have to backtrack it back to there, and then from that point, it would have to go back into the system. So they weren't talking about we're going to handwrite some notes like I say, 3 cases of hot sauce we sold. We sold a case of white wine. They're not going to write that down. Everything's digitized and barcoded, and without the electricity to scan what goes out of the store, they're literally talking like a 2-week delay in ordering to get things back in. They're not willing to do that because the manpower hours to retrace all those transactions is just a nightmare loss of just wasted wages. And, they're down to the cent on a lot of these things here. So, prepare accordingly. It's not going to be that easy for you just to have a handful of cash and run and get your food. I'm really saying highly doubtful. That's why you want to suss out your local retailers anyway, because those are the ones that will trade silver. Those are the ones that might trade something else that they would need. Of course, they're going to take cash in the beginning, but as I've been told by many, like a special forces person, people in the banks, police officers, people who've run these kind of grid down scenarios before that have seen it happen in different countries, your money's only going to be good for 20 days, maybe maximum 30. The first 5 to 10 days is going to be a very integral time. Like everybody's going to be scrambling for cash because it's literally going to dry up. If you can't get it from the ATMs, people are going to be pulling it out of their mattresses. And the money that gets spent or pulled in by vendors, they're not going to want to give out change either. You might have to go up to the nearest dollar because they're not going to want to be bringing out change and giving it to you. So it's very important to have a bunch of 1s and 5s and 10s, 20s. But if you're going to buy a big item, obviously 100s and 50s are good. But so if you want to buy something and it comes to $2.38 and you only have a $5 bill, they're going to charge you the $5 bill. You're not going to get the change. But then there's also what was talked about in many a grid down in different countries is people start to get like an arbitrage on the change on the money. So if you have 5 $1 bills, you could actually bargain with that person that owns the store and actually get $3 or something of goods or $3.50 worth of goods to get those ones from you. You know, there's an arbitrage. You might get $6 worth of goods, but they'll take 5 ones. But then on the other hand, if you only give them a 5, they're not going to want to give you the change because the ones are going to become so valuable. Now, this is only going to work for the first 2 weeks or so. And if it does stay down longer than that, then about the 3rd week, they're going to realize that the money's not going to be worth as much and people will slowly stop taking it. By the end of the month, people will not take that cash anymore. Because this grid down is absolutely going to be accompanying the switch in systems. And, you know, I did a video this week, Ransom, about the conversion from the LIBOR rate, which was the London Interbank Overnight Lending Rate, which was the standard London-based interest rates that banks would charge each other on an overnight lend to meet their reserve requirements globally. There was only one system globally. June 30th, they're turning to a brand new system called SOFR, S-O-F-R. This is going to offer 6 different liquid markets across the planet that are going to set interest rates. The problem is the first tranche that they need to convert from the old LIBOR rate into the new SOFR rate, $200 trillion. And I said that correctly, 200 trillion. The total amount is actually 610 trillion. But with these leveraged and derivatized contracts, some of these contracts are out at like literally 1,000 to $1. There's $1,000 worth of contracts out for each physical $1. So you're talking numbers so big that I couldn't even get my calculator to work on it. You're talking about 610 trillion times 1,000. But this first batch, they tried to run an $80 trillion conversion in 2021, and it failed completely. So they've pushed it back. There's no more contracts written with the old LIBOR rates on them. Everything is moved to the new system. So anything issued from June 30th forward will be in the new SOFR rates. The problem is these rates right now, even as we speak today, are 0.1% different. So the conversion from LIBOR to SOFR, they actually have something called a backstop rate where there's 0.1% difference. Now do the 0.1% difference on 200 trillion. That amount of money is going to evaporate into thin air. Now, who do you think is going to take the hit on that? And how do you think they're going to redistribute that capital loss so no banks and no governments take a hit on that loss? That's going to be collateralized through the citizens of the nation of the world. And since it's based in pounds and U.S. dollars, it seems that difference is going to be asked or somehow stolen through inflation for the U.S. public to make up the difference for that. That's where we sit at the end of the month. So, I mean, It's going to be kind of a weird time, but I'm just trying to walk you through some of these scenarios of stores being open or not and how quickly your money will run out of its value, because approximately 30 days after, nobody will want the dollars anymore if they're going to a new system, because they really won't be convertible anywhere. So anyway, I'll leave it there, man.
Yeah, it's starting to. I've been showing them while you were talking about that kind of the way that these stores are going to be like here. And first, they're doing it with like goods now, like products that get stolen a lot or get taken out of the store. But the kind of scenarios that we're talking about are going to increase people's attention to be getting food items instead of, disposable income items. And this is a cool article talking about the way Walgreens has changed over the way that they do business there and how in the future it's going to change. And I see this pattern. This is exactly what we were talking about. And I wanted to go through a couple of articles, not saying we see the future, but all stuff we've talked about that is now reality from last year to now. So here's the stores. Inside the store, customers will find an area where they can pick up their orders, digital kiosks for placing an order, as well as an area to shop for essential items. And then treated like a criminal, basically now. And then as it goes down here, where this comment is going to be a reality, and this is what we were talking about. The guy says, I knew this would happen. Next stop will be having to scan our ID or a credit card before you even enter the store at all. Putting this scenario where in the future people are going to be going to these stores, they get their goods, there's so much security in there, they're not worried about being robbed anymore, the box store's not. So you're going to be on your own when you get in the parking lot. And that's where the thefts are going to happen. But let's skip through some of these things. Okay. We talked about the robots that were going to all come out this year, last year. And I brought this up as far as war and the border. But now several U.S. cities are now, adopting the programs, the dystopian and creeping technology of police dogs running around everywhere. And we saw that in China first, and then it rolled over here just like we talked about. And here's a cool article. Literally what we talked about last year. Let me see. Here it is. They're worried about the Balkanization of Europe because the conflicts are spreading just like we said it was going to do, just like the 90s and other stuff. But we know that this area is classic for World War I and World War II starting. So that's where the destabilization, just like we said. And then, of course, everybody talking about their nukes like it's no big deal. Russia saying, you know what, whoever joins us, we'll let you have nukes. Don't worry about it. And here's another article talking about Ukraine and Russia ran out of munitions. Now they're kind of down to the nukes. So we're actually getting into this this era that we've been talking about. It's no longer in the future. It's right now. The stores are changing over to a just-in-time system where there's really nothing in the store. And then when you get there, you have to go through all these security procedures like you would at an airport. And then, you have the other ones, these bigger box stores like Macy's and Walmart and all of them talking about they're worried because the economy is collapsing, and they all know it is. Why? Is it planned? I think so. But this whole idea is stuff we've talked about, the drones and the war, and now the major attacks going on back and forth are done by robots. So there was that whole thing that we were talking about. This is why the U.S. wanted to go over to a drone military because that's the future of it. They're not going to be sending stuff in there. Like we traditionally did. It's all going to be robotic. So it tells you that they're not really worried about the sun, doing anything to them because they know they'll pop out with all of their technologies. It doesn't take that long. So when we're talking about a reset, we're talking about a reset only for the peoples of the earth. And, also in that new project for a new American century that mentions that we'd be going over to an all AI Air Force by 2025, which now we're right around the doorstep from that. It also talks about how the United States and its allies will control low Earth orbit. And this is exactly what they've been preparing, and now they're actually doing. So the U.S. ready for fight in space if we have to, says military official. Now, what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about shooting down or controlling other people's satellites. And if you can control that area and anything does happen as far as an EMP or something from the sun or any of that, you can guarantee that there's only going to be one party that has the technology and space there. And this has all been planned out for this time period. So here we go. It's kind of like the last warnings of the era, that if you don't get your future in order, which includes food prepping, what you're going to do in the scenarios, what you're teaching your children, are they capable of doing some of the things that you've told them? This is where we're at. This is the time period. So we're finally here where we have to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, or our knowledge into action, and control the destination of our own future, because they have a very different future plan for us. And the only way that we can get out of that is to say no and just opt out of their programs. And if you've seen from the recent boycotts of certain companies, it very much is possible.
Yeah, it seems they're trying to use this as a thing, knowing people are going to push back. And at what point do you have no more options for shopping, because every one of the corporates have gone this direction? And then at the point where everybody's pushing back, saying no to every single corporation that's pushing the agenda, will it leave you anywhere to go shopping? This is the whole thing that's being discussed right now, being done on purpose to cut off every single venue possibility for you to shop. Then what? You got to make your own clothes again. Get out weaving and grow the cotton. See you next week. DuByne, Ransom Godwin signing off from MIAC Conversation.
Thank you for listening.